want to talk to you today about fat. Fat gets a very bad press, but in fact it doesn't make us fat. It doesn't give us heart disease. It doesn't fur up the arteries. In fact, it's really very good for us. And it actually should be the bulk of our diet. You know, humans have eaten fat and plenty of it since the dawn of time. A 250,000 years since humans first walked on the earth. My name is Graham Keegan, and I specialise in helping people who are suffering from type 2 diabetes. I can talk to you about this subject because I've had type 2 diabetes myself, and I've been overweight, and I've got myself into remission, and I've got myself back into that healthy BMI range. So, you know, I haven't just read this in a book or read it or studied it in the classroom. I've done this myself, and I can help you do the same. So let's talk about fat and why it gets such a bad press. Well, this goes back to 1978 when an American scientist called Ansel Keys published what's called his 7 countries study. And he came to the conclusion in the study that eating fat causes your cholesterol to rise, and cholesterol causes heart disease. So he said, avoid fats and eat carbohydrate. He chose his data for his study selectively. And quite frankly, the study has been thoroughly discredited since. But he set us on this path where we all think that fat is bad for us, and we avoid the skin on chicken or the fat on meat or fats in yogurt. We have low-fat yogurts and low-fat mayonnaise. And look at the state of us. You know, most of the world now is either overweight or heading toward obesity. In the United States of America, people who are obese are in these 30-40%, and some like about 50% of their population is diabetic or pre-diabetic. You know, so this 60-odd years experiment that we should not be eating fat but eating carbohydrate has clearly failed. Clearly failed big time, and we're all suffering from that. So what I want to go through today is to focus on fat. I just want to give you a summary first of all about what the macronutrients are and how our body deals with these macronutrients. Now, the body takes these macronutrients, and there are three. There's fat, protein, and carbohydrate, and breaks them down into more straightforward, easier substances which it can deal with. The liver is the factory which does this conversion. So let's deal with fat first of all. Now, fats, sources of fats, healthy fats are likes of butter, oils, nuts, dairy products, oily fish, and fatted meat. It's broken. The body breaks that down into simpler fats, and if it doesn't need to use it straight away, it is stored as fat as well in the adipose tissue. Protein, such as meat, nuts, and dairy products. This is broken down to amino acids, which are essential building blocks for our bodies, and is used in the muscle tissue, and the excess is turned into glucose. Eating a lot of protein doesn't make us build muscle, popular misconception. It becomes glucose. And talking about glucose, the third group is carbohydrate. So we get carbohydrates from bread, rice, potato, pasta, sugars, and these are all broken down into glucose. And one last one, not a macronutrient, but just out of interest here, alcohol. That's broken down and is stored as fat. So glucose from carbohydrates, and in part also from protein, and fat, which comes from fat, are the only sources of energy for the body. Carbohydrates give us glucose, fat gives us fat. Now, importantly, fat does not make our insulin spike, and that's critical for type 2 diabetes sufferers, and frankly for everybody, not to try to avoid insulin spikes, and also makes us feel full, which is important. Carbs do just the opposite. Carbohydrates cause the insulin to spike because it causes the blood sugar to spike, and also it makes you feel hungry after a while. It doesn't satisfy us in terms of our dietary needs. And actually, there's nothing in carbohydrates you can't get elsewhere. People say, well, you should be having whole grain carbohydrates because it's a good source of fibre for the microbiome. Yeah, sure, but you can get that from vegetables, leafy green vegetables in particular. So carbs is something which we shouldn't be eating very many in our diet at all, quite frankly. So let's talk about a bit more fats now, more detail. Now there's 7 of them. There's 7 types of fats. Some are good for us, some are very good for us, some aren't so good for us. So we'll go through these in pretty short order here, just to give you an idea of what's going on there. You can always come back and I'll do another video in more detail about this another time. The first type is omega-3s. We all have heard of these. Great sources of these are oily fish, and also the likes of some meats as well. The benefits: they are heart healthy, they are anti-inflammatory and anti-Alzheimer's. Very good for us. A lack of omega-3 has been linked with depression in some studies. And one other point here to make is that vegan diets, and don't have anything against vegan diets, but vegan diets typically have a very poor amount of omega-3s, so some sort of supplement may well be necessary. The next one is monounsaturated. Olive oil is the obvious example here. Very good for us, gives us energy. It's very good for the liver. It's anti-inflammatory, but it should really be used and consumed at room temperature because it has what they call a low smoke point. So if you cook with it only at relatively low temperatures, it does actually turn into a trans fat. So it's something to put on your salads, etc., as opposed to cooking with it. But lovely stuff, olive oil. The next one is polyunsaturated fatty acids. These can be found in salmons and nuts and seeds, anti-inflammatory again, and also have a high smoke point, which is very good. Saturated fats had a bad press for years. It's a good source of meat and dairy, very good sources for that. Anti-inflammatory, neither good nor bad for us, but they're a good source of food, and they do have this making you feel full and not causing your insulin to spike. Nearly there. Medium chain triglycerides. Coconut oil is a good source of this. It's been linked with improving skin health and a good source of energy, but too much can overwhelm the liver. So just be mindful of that. Omega-6, last 2 now here. This is where the problems start to come. Omega-6, a source of omega-6 is seed oils. Does it have benefits? Well, it probably does have benefits, but not particularly obvious. But the body does need omega-6. And what it is linked with is the fact it is thought to be inflammatory. And it is recommended by the experts that if we eat omega-6, we shouldn't be eating too much of this in terms of a ratio to omega-3. So probably the best ratio is 1-to-1 omega-3s to omega-6s. A source of this is seed oils, as I say, and views are now changing a bit about this. I was reading a study only a few weeks ago saying that seed oils are not as bad as some people say, and as long as we don't overconsume them. And the final one, and this is the problem one, these are trans fats. Found in pastries, cakes, biscuits, fried foods, hard margarines. They don't have any benefits at all. And also the problem is they can't be broken down the body, and they end up sitting in the liver, giving you fatty liver disease. And these are trans fats. You may well see them on labels of processed foods described as partially hydrogenated fat. Partially hydrogenated fat. This means trans fats. Something to avoid, frankly. No other way of putting it. So with all this said about carbohydrates, proteins and fats, the different types of fats, so let me give you a framework for a diet, which I would recommend, and increasingly more and more people are saying the same. We should have a diet which is high in healthy fats. They're not trans fats, but the omega-3s, etc. of this world. High in healthy fats, and moderate in protein, and low in carbohydrate. The carbohydrates you do eat, now we have to do another video on this, should be the whole carbohydrates, not the refined carbohydrates, white flour, and not sugars, which is just sugar, so the likes of a donut is out, I'm sorry, just out. If you have a weight issue you're trying to deal with, it's not just low carbohydrate, it's very low carbohydrate. If you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, it should be very, very low carbohydrate. So high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate. And I'll give you this as well as a way to just think about things when you're buying food. So we've got that balance between the three macronutrients. Then also just consider this, is that eat food which is fish from the sea, food that is grown in the ground, or food that is fed on food grown in the ground. Now, if you stick to that, you won't go far wrong. And if you're thinking about those foods that I've just described there, none of those will have labels. They don't need labels. A piece of beef doesn't need a label. A carrot doesn't need a label. Salmon doesn't need a label. But a donut does, because it's refined flour and it's lots of sugar. Now, let me be of further help to you here. Every week I do a live event on Zoom. I do a different topic to do with diabetes every week. It's for 30 or 40 minutes, and we go live at 6 p.m. UK time on a Monday. It's Zoom, and you'll ask me whatever you want, and it's about, as I say, 30-40 minutes in length. So I'll put a link to that in the description below. I hope you found this video helpful, and I wish you the best of health. Talk to you again soon.